Hello, Internet. Welcome to episode 342 of the Assorted Calibers podcast. The second night of podcast is a little bit for everyone. I'm Weer'd, and with me tonight, she's wonderful. She's amazing. She's radiant. We all love her. She's the greatest hostess in the entire universe. Erin Paulette. How you doing, Erin?
These intros keep getting longer and longer. I was seriously going, get on with it, dude.
You just watch me. I'll just cut it completely short. I'm Weer'd.
Sure.
This is Erin Paulette. How you doing, Erin? The speed round.
So how was your Easter, Weer'd?
My Easter was actually quite good. My wife was unfortunately sick, so she ended up staying home, and it was the right choice for her. She just stayed in bed, and she is slowly recovering. Hopefully she'll be fine, because they're actually her decision of, all right, well, what do we do while I'm in Atlanta for the NRA annual meeting? She just decided, her aunt, she was seeing if her mom would go. Her mom wasn't interested, but they're going down to New York City, so they're having a little getaway while I'm having my getaway. But hopefully she'll be all better for that, because nothing worse than traveling with a cold. Went there. The whole bunch of family was around. Had a really good time. But actually, one thing I kind of wanted to talk about, and if you don't mind, is I had a spiritual moment, and that was, and of course I am not a Christian in any sense of the word. I'm very respectful to those of the tradition, but it's just not how I was brought up, and not how I roll. My great uncle, who's in his 90s, we have a tradition. He pulls up to the there's a loading zone near one of the elevators, and we help him out, and somebody helps him up, and he throws me the keys. I go park his car. When it's time for him to go, I go get the keys, drive back, and drive back and pick it back up. And I know for a fact, because I drove the long way around the parking lot to get to the parking spot, going with his car, and nothing was going on. But when I went to go pick his car up, turn it back on, the radio kicked on, and this being my great uncle, it was tuned to NPR. And I despise how the voice talent of the people of NPR and how they read the news, and nobody wants to listen to that. And I looked over at the power button on the radio, and I said, look, I'm not going to mess with the guy's car. I'll be there in a few minutes. It's only going to take 30 seconds for me to get over to where he's going, and then the car's turned off, and that's all I need to worry about. And in the time driving over, they were reporting about the fact that the Pope did not officiate the mass for Easter, but he did go out in the Pope mobile and meet with members of the public, and it was the first time he'd met with them in a while. And I knew he'd been very, very sick, and so I was like, oh, well, that's good that he got out and all that. And the thing that really got me was, again, then first thing this morning, I opened up my phone, and one of the first things I see was that the Pope had passed away. And I went, oh, wow. And it really kind of hit me on just the fact that, he had pneumonia. He was really sick. He wasn't doing well. He's had respiratory problems his whole life. And him going out to see all those people, and I guarantee everybody that had gone to the Vatican for Easter was not expecting to see the Pope, because, again, he'd been in the hospital for like a couple of months, I think, and all that. Like, if anything, they were probably expecting to hear had he passed away or not. And then all of a sudden there he is in the Pope mobile and greeting the fans and blessing the crowd and all of that. And for all we know, that probably was kind of what did him in. He probably didn't have a whole lot of energy left, and the exertion of just being out in the public like that probably was a major toll on him. And it was a really, I found it really interesting. I found it really neat. It was a, sacrifice to the faith and all that. And I've had some issues with Pope Francis. I won't get into it here. I've spoken about him before, and I gotta say, his essentially his last act really kind of changed my opinion of him.
Yeah, you mentioned in Discord that this was the ultimate mortification of the flesh on a day which is about the mortification of the flesh.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't want to get too much into deep theology on it, but yeah, that's exactly how I saw it. It's one of those, like, I've got to imagine. I mean, like I said, my wife's got like a chest cold right now, and she just like, she went out for like just a walk just to get some fresh air, just came in and just like looked absolutely miserable. And I'm like, "You okay?" And she goes, "Yeah, it just took a lot out of me." And just thinking about the fact that, like, it had to have been like, especially given he passed away like that night, that, he had to have been miserable in the Pope Mobile. Like, he had to have put some fortitude to put on a happy face and to give his blessings and to celebrate that day. And it did seem very fitting.
Mm-hmm. So this was completely not where I thought you were going to go when I asked you how your Easter was, because you are quite famously you've called yourself the kitchen bitch, and you are a foodie, and I thought you were going to talk about what you made for Easter dinner.
Well, it's just become a long-standing tradition, and actually my parents are currently in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. They're going on a little senior outing trip with the retirement community. Or actually, I don't even know. I don't know if it's from the retirement community, but either way, they're going with a bunch of old people. They're going to go see some Amish people, and so they were like, "We are leaving the next day. Do not bring anything extra. We just, most of the leftovers are going to go home with everybody else, because we're leaving." So I didn't really make a whole lot, but my one request is that is always is my, well, they call it my dinner rolls. They're actually my potato hamburger buns. But I just make them half sized. So they're little baby slider buns. And those are the dinner rolls for people. And it seems pretty humble to me, but everybody rants and raves about them. So what am I to complain?
I'm trying to set something up and you're not being cooperative.
Okay.
So Weer'd, what is your favorite Easter dish?
Ham.
I mean, you said that pretty glibly. I mean, are you being honest, or are you just saying something just to get it said?
Well, I don't want to do it wrong again. I don't want to get in trouble. I do like ham, though.
Okay. So, my favorite Easter dish is angeled eggs.
Angeled eggs?
Yes.
I have never heard the term before.
So, to make angeled eggs, what you do is you hard boil some eggs, and you cut them in half. You take the yolk out, and you whip the yolk with some various things. I don't know, I'm not really a cook, but like, mayonnaise and other things. And then you put the whipped yolk back into the egg half, and then you serve it like that. And it's sort of like a little egg hors d'oeuvre.
Mm-hmm. But what? That's a deviled egg.
Yes. Thank you. That is where I wanted to go. So when I was very young, like 6 or younger, we were having these, and I asked what they were, and Mom said deviled eggs. And I, being very young, very innocent, and having grown up in a Christian household, I was aghast. And I said, "Mommy, we're Christians. On Easter, we can't have anything with the devil in it." And I don't know if I want to say I'm the one who came up with it. Maybe Mom did. But from then on, I insisted on calling them angeled eggs because I wouldn't eat anything that was associated with the devil.
Well, isn't that wonderful?
And that's just been the family code ever since.
Is that for any holiday or just for the Christian holidays? If you're just at a cookout, are they deviled eggs or are they angel eggs?
Well, whenever we make them, they're angel eggs.
Excellent. And of course, there's the great meme, and it's always the greatest, as the, would you eat 15 hard-boiled eggs? Oh, no, that sounds gross. Put on a plate of deviled eggs. Mm-hmm.
So, yes, the entire point of me asking was you would talk about the dinner you made, and then I would ask you your favorite dish. You'd ask me mine, and then I would tell you this cute little story about Aaron and angel eggs. And it was pulling teeth. Oh, weird.
we must plan these bits ahead of time. So did you have a good Easter?
It was all right. I mean, I didn't hate it. I went to church for the first time in a long time because I'm not going to get into this whole thing, but the former church we went to, we had a falling out with. And, then there was COVID and things like that, and Mom kind of fell out of the habit. But she decided she wanted to go somewhere for Easter, and, of course, I'll take you, I'll come along. And she picked one that was like about, 10 minutes away. And it was a Baptist church, and Mom grew up Southern Baptist. So that'd be comfortable for her. And I didn't know how well I was going to do because my experience with Southern Baptists has usually been of the fire and brimstone variety, with preachers that talk in that particular cadence that Jesse Jackson uses.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought I was going to be gritting my teeth and enduring it the entire time, and I didn't. I was overstimulated while I was there because the lights were way too bright and shining in my eyes, and I don't know if it was just like the piano was too loud or the acoustics, but I really couldn't hear most of the singing, and the sermon went on for way longer than it should have. I mean, the entire service was like 90 minutes. But still, despite all that, I mean, I'm not going to say I had a great time, but I didn't. I'm surprised that I didn't hate it. And so it was like, okay, yeah, special occasion. All right, I guess I'm glad I went. I'm not really interested in returning to that church, but, hey, I went to church on Easter. So, I feel like I did my Christian duty.
Well, there you are.
Yeah.
That is good. You're absolved of all sins, Aaron.
I mean, technically speaking, going to church doesn't absolve me.
I know. I'm being a heathen.
All right. So I think we've talked this to death.
Fair enough.
How about we get on to the main topics?
Yes. So, yeah, first up is, again, we got to talk about them. We got to get ahead of it. There was a mass shooting. Thankfully, it was not a particularly, well, technically it probably doesn't count as a mass shooting, depending on whose definition you get onto, because only 2 people died, 5 others were wounded, and that's was in your state of Florida, Aaron.
Yes,
at Florida State University,
which is up in Tallahassee in the Panhandle.
Mm-hmm. I don't think we've got all the details just yet. The killer was wounded by police. It looks like they're actually going to survive, which I'm disappointed. It would be there's part of me that prefers that, because hey, we can get more information from them and maybe find ways to make things safer. All that never happens. It never happens. It's never good. It would have been better off if somebody had put him down. But
I mean, they did shoot him.
They did shoot him.
He's in the hospital with, how did they put it, injuries that are serious but not critical or something like that.
Yeah, he's expected to recover.
Yeah. So what I found most interesting is that this shooting started off very similar to Sandy Hook, in that the shooter stole a gun from his mother.
Mm-hmm.
Fortunately, he didn't kill his mother like the Sandy Hook murderer did. But the interesting point for people who don't know is that his mother is a sheriff's deputy of 18 years. And I did digging, and I have yet to find how he got the gun. And that's going to be a definite point of investigation, because everyone is saying, she's been extremely professional for nearly 20 years. So how did her son get hold of it? And
he used it was a handgun. I've heard in some instances that this was a former duty weapon.
Yes. Well, I don't think they said what model, but they did say it was .45 caliber, and it was the mother's former duty weapon, but she bought it, I guess, when they transitioned to a different platform or something. He also had with him a shotgun and an AR-15. And I haven't heard one way or the other that those belonged to the mother, but I would imagine so. What's another thing that's very interesting is that prior to this, he was very involved with law enforcement, and not in the usual negative way. I mean, he was known to the police, but that's because he grew up in a law enforcement family and was very active in a program, something like the Sheriff's Advisory Council. It was essentially a liaison between law enforcement and teenagers. And, by all accounts, he was a well-spoken young man, although they do mention that, like, in the past 2-3 years, he was expressing fairly radical hard-right views. But what I'm getting at here is that they say, it's no surprise that, he knew how to use a gun. He's been strongly associated with the sheriff's department. And so this really came as a surprise to a lot of people. And we're still, I think this happened Thursday.
I think so.
And so this is Monday as we record it. So, the 72 hours have passed, but we still don't have a lot of information. The only thing that I've been able to determine by digging, and this does not excuse him by any means, but this is a young man who has been, the term that they use is emotional dysregulation. And he was on medication and on therapy, and it's believed that he stopped taking his medication. But I want to say that actually his mother is really not his biological mother, because they refer to his biological mother. They don't call him his stepmother, so I assume she adopted him. But this young man, when he was 10 years old, his mother, who had dual American and Norwegian citizenship, she got temporary custody of him to take him to Disney World, and instead put him on a plane, abducted him to Norway, and his father had to fly over there and get the Norwegian police involved to take his son home. And that really affected him, such that, among other things, he affected a name change. So this does not, of course, excuse his actions, but it does explain, to some degree, the emotional problems he was having. And so it seems like something within him snapped, and he had been fighting it for a while. So it's not good. I don't defend it, but it's, to me, at least a little more understandable than someone just deciding to be evil and murder people.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I took from this.
Yeah, no, that's true. And yeah, like I said, we don't really know about the motivation. It may be a long while because he's alive, and so therefore it's not going to be a question of, we're going to dig through his room and find manifestos or email correspondence or YouTube videos or whatever these people leave behind for all that. Did you see anything? I haven't seen anything on it. But I saw some videos on and around the day it happened that looked like they were from like a live stream. So I don't know if he had live streamed it or not. So many of them do now. but a lot of this will happen is, of course, he's alive, so therefore he's going to go to trial for this. So they're going to be very tight-lipped about a lot of the stuff because that's going to be used in the court case.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we don't know. But the big thing I wanted to mention was that, within hours of this hitting the news, all of the anti-gun groups and Democratic co-chair David Hogg all were blaming Florida lawmakers that stood for gun rights in the state of Florida as somehow being responsible for this. And again, this Florida has restrictions that the 21 plus restriction, where if you're under 21, you can't actually buy, or you can't buy the guns that he had, handguns and an AR-15. Is that correct?
Well, I mean, federal law prohibits anyone under 21 from buying a handgun.
Yeah. Doesn't Florida have an additional one that passed in that bevy of laws that they had?
Yeah, post Parkland it did. And I'm trying to remember, because we discussed it not too long ago. Yeah. I don't know if it's actually been repealed or if DeSantis said he wanted it repealed. But there has been movement to remove that law because, yes, after Parkland, they made it illegal for anyone under 21 to purchase and perhaps even own a firearm, including long guns.
And so, yeah, so however he got it was not through a legal channel. He either stole it from his mom or got it from somebody else who may or may not have been able to legally sell it to him.
Well, we know for a fact that the pistol belongs to his mom because it was her service weapon. Regarding the shotgun and the AR-15, we don't know yet.
Yeah, we do not know. But either way, and then on top of that, it's a campus, so it is a gun-free zone. And
well, yes, it is a gun-free zone, but there was, within the past few months, a push to get campus carry allowed, and that got defeated. And while I don't know that would have made a difference, it might have.
I mean, I will say, just from the fact that I've read just about every manifesto from every killer that's left one, and all of them, including it was listed in the Nashville shooters report. We obviously didn't get to read their actual writing, minus the stuff that was leaked, but it repeatedly said in the report that they were worried about a quote unquote hero. And so they were worried that somebody was going to interrupt them as they were doing their shooting. And that is definitely a common occurrence, is how long do I have before I'm going to be interrupted doing this? And so the news all talking about campus carry and how people can carry on campus, and maybe even, somebody that's doing the man on the street interview that's pulling up their shirt to reveal that, yeah, no, I've got a gun on me at campus right now. Situation very well might have deterred this, or at least relocated it.
So I am looking up that question you asked me about Florida law, and it's passed the House to repeal it. And that was back in March. I haven't seen anything about it being passed in the Senate, going to DeSantis to sign. But yes, you had to be 21 or older to buy any kind of firearm. Mm-hmm. I'm not finding anything about ownership.
Either way, one more gun law wouldn't have done anything, and possibly repealing some of them may have done quite a bit. So,
well, yeah, that's the problem. We don't have the ability to go back to a save point and change the parameters and see how it would have played out.
Yeah.
It might have, it might not have, but we saw how it reacted, or we saw how things turned out without it. And I will give kudos to the police, who responded very quickly. They said that they responded in minutes, and usually that's tens of minutes, but it helps that it was a big campus in a big city, and usually you've got police that are dedicated to patrolling that campus, and so that's why they responded so quickly, I would imagine.
Mm-hmm.
And so, only 2 dead. And by the way, the 2 people he killed, there was no relation at all. It just seemed like he decided he was going to go kill people. It wasn't like there was a grudge or anything. So it is a bad situation, but as bad situations go, it turned out pretty well because it could have been so much worse.
Yeah. And we will be keeping an eye on this case. If for anything, just if there's any information that comes forward on, what worked and what didn't work as far as safety and security goes. But yeah, you mentioned that we can't have a save state and roll back time, but we can watch as the results play out in different states. And in this case, we're heading over to the state of New Jersey, where
which exit?
The attorney general Matt Platkin was being questioned over some various issues within the state, and the key fact is that somebody mentioned that 778 people were shot last year in New Jersey, and that represents the smallest number of people shot here since state police began tracking shooting data in 2009. And this is Senator Doug Steinhardt who said this, and then he says, what you're saying makes zero sense. You come here telling us that shooting stats are down, yet 6,000 more people have carry permits than they did 2.5 years preceding Bruin. With people running around carrying firearms like that, why aren't the stats through the roof? And Platkin responded, I'm not sure that anything I said doesn't make sense. Statistics I'm referencing are kept and collected by the state police. I don't cook them up in my office. And so it's just denying the evil. How could that be? More people are we passed these gun control laws so that we could have less violence. And yet suddenly when we get relief from the Supreme Court or from legislators, and hopefully legislators will be doing more relief, suddenly, crime numbers drop. Funny how that happens.
I really don't have much to add, but I will say in this article, they actually state the full name of a particular Johns Hopkins school.
Oh.
And they reference a 2022 study by Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. And they say that that study found gun assaults rose in states that relaxed restrictions on unconcealed carry permits. And most of the time, in fact, nearly all of the time, it's just, a Johns Hopkins School of Public Health. Bloomberg isn't mentioned. And so it's at least refreshing for once that it's not being swept under the rug.
And yeah, I haven't read this study though. I'm actually clicking on it right now to skim it to look at the methods. Let's see. Do we have the author? The study was supported by the Joyce Foundation. I'm getting at the end. Mitchell Doucette, Alexander McCourt, Cassandra Crifasi, and Daniel Webster. I know Daniel Webster. He is a very honest man. He's not. So more than likely, this is yet another junk science. And of course, I'm very perplexed that this is not a standard scientific paper, peer review style format, which also may be telling. But either way, I will say that I have a lot of confidence that there will be some pretty major oversights in this study, because of course the the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health was purchased by Michael Bloomberg, mostly because the CDC no longer allowed grant money for studying things like or you could study gun violence, but you couldn't use it to push gun control or use it as anti-gun propaganda. And so Michael Bloomberg had to step outside those lines and bought himself a school.
So you mentioned Daniel Webster and how he wasn't trustworthy. How would you rate him in comparison to your favorite gun prohibitionist, Garen Wintermute?
He's honestly speaking, actually, I don't know if anybody is worse than Garen Wintermute. I actually don't give him nearly as much play. Arthur Kellerman's the one that I rag on the most because he's the most quoted. Though
okay.
Garen Wintermute did a thing where he went to a gun show and just took notes at all the things that he saw at the gun show that he thought was illegal. And didn't reference any particular laws or anything like that. Just, I saw two people. I saw somebody pay for a gun with cash. That was probably an illegal straw buy, and all that. So that's a pretty tough one to beat. Like Daniel Webster, at least he puts a little bit of shine on that sneaker.
Well, as Mythbusters showed us, you can indeed polish a turd.
You can indeed polish a turd. That was a great episode.
It was.
Speaking of turds, the lovely state of Massachusetts and causing even more problems. So there is a challenge against, let's see, what's the title of this one? It is...
I don't know what it's titled, but it's about the Massachusetts assault weapon and magazine ban.
Yeah, it's not the standard SCOTUS format where it actually has a very simple. It's just like have the National Association for Gun Rights versus Andrea Campbell in her capacity as the Attorney General. So, this is against our assault weapons and magazine ban here, and again. And this has happened again. This is, it's Groundhog Day. This was back when it was Warman v. Healy, essentially just saying that the AR-15 is too powerful and too dangerous to be considered something that is protected by the Second Amendment. And it's got all the standard stuff. It talks about the muzzle velocity of the bullet, which... if you know anything about ballistics, you're just like, what are we doing here?
Yeah, there were two things that really jumped out at me, and they're talking about the AR-15's particular dangerousness. And they say, okay, so it fires bullets at over 3,000 FPS, and I believe that's towards the high end. But here, leading to, quote, cavitation, which is the capacity to destroy tissue beyond the direct pathway of the bullet, end quote. Yes, cavitation, that's what happens when bullets hit flesh. You see it all the time in gel. Mm-hmm. It doesn't just happen with AR-15s. You see it happen with bullets, too. So it's not exactly cherry picking. It's more like they're counting on the ignorance of the people reading this to assume that the AR-15 is unique in having cavitational bullets or bullet effects or whatever. And then later on, they basically demonize the recoil spring because, it does so without imparting the excessive recoil of a hunting rifle, which precludes rapid firing on target because of the obligatory motion of the gun and its impact on the shooter. And so they're basically saying, because you're not suffering, the punishing recoil of a deer round from a bolt-action rifle, you can kill more people. And it's just, this is the kind of thing that you would trot out for people who only vaguely know how guns work, mm-hmm. and what they know is only from Hollywood. Because anyone who has just the merest understanding of how they work is going to look at it and go, yeah, that's how semi-autos work. Yeah, that's how bullets work. This is not unique.
And also, I've got to love just this is one of those, like, showing your ignorance, but you're trying to sound smart, is the excessive recoil of a hunting rifle, as if hunting rifle is a concise thing. Because you know it's a perfectly reasonable hunting rifle, an AR-15. I happen to own a 5-round magazine for my FAL. All my magazines are all, pre-ban, mostly Israeli surplus, but I bought a DS Arms 5-round magazine for just in case I get a chance to go up to Maine and hunt deer, where they have a 5-round magazine capacity limit. And let me tell you, if I'm going to take a deer, I'm going to take a deer with that FAL, because I'm very, very confident with it, and it's in 308, so it will. That is an excellent deer cartridge, but it's one of those, but it's also an assault weapon.
So everything you have said is correct, but I also want to take the opposite tack, and so you know what else is a hunting rifle? 22 long rifle.
Absolutely,
because you can use that to harvest small game,
mm-hmm.
And gee. Does anyone think that 22 long rifle has excessive recoil?
Mm-hmm. And I mean, so many young bird hunters and all that started off with 410s, and let me tell you, a 410, it's got a lot more recoil than a 22, but yeah, it's probably on par with many pistol caliber carbines, especially if it's a semi-auto. So yeah, this is pure ignorance, and I will also add that the reason why they were sidestepping into all this pearl cut clutching safety concerns, that of course are absolute nonsense, because again, most rifle rounds, any supersonic bullet is going to create a temporary wound cavity, aka cavitation. And there may even be some handgun bullets that are able to do it as well. But we just got talking about a spree killer that just was using a 45 caliber handgun that's probably under 900 feet per second for muzzle velocity, and yet 2 people are dead, a bunch of people are wounded. So it's not about safety, but they were citing that they could get public safety was because of the wording put into the domestic violence case that went through. And I've just suddenly drawn a blank. Rahimi.
Oh, okay.
I drew a blank on that just for a second, but yeah, they're referencing the Rahimi case, and so yeah, we mentioned that was a bad case and bad law, and I suspected that we weren't going to do well for it because the defendant was such a scumbag. And yeah, this is there's some talk that was a calculated effort by some people that don't like the Second Amendment to get that case in there, because they knew that it would be easy to sway some of the more squishy justices to side with the anti-gun side, with Rahimi being such a jerk. And so now they're citing court precedents where we could cite public safety as a potential for infringing on the Second Amendment.
Well, I mean, isn't that what the New Mexico governor did a couple of years back? Mm-hmm. Declared it a public health emergency.
That is correct.
So on the one hand, I feel heartened that they are trying anything. They're throwing everything they can at the wall to see what sticks, which means they're getting desperate. Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, it bothers me because they are literally trying anything and everything, and sometimes it works, and that bothers me.
Yeah, and when we still aren't seeing any cases in the Supreme Court. So I mean, the bottom line is what we need. If you're not like me and living in Massachusetts, you should really contact your legislators. And I mean, even if you are living in Massachusetts, it might be worthwhile. Reach out to your legislators and say that we need some bills that will just repeal those. We passed an assault weapons ban. Why can't we pass a law that states that semi-auto rifles are perfectly reasonable firearms for law-abiding Americans to own?
Yeah, I actually think that the common usage canard was trotted out for this one as well.
Yeah, I must have missed that one, and it's a big old dense document, so I don't expect you to find it right. I believe definitely. I got to the point where the complainants definitely cited cited the Hellerver DC. There one such limitation is a historical tradition of prohibiting the carry of dangerous and unusual weapons that were not in common use at the time of the Second Amendment was drafted, and so which is internal quotation marks and citations omitted, but that was not what it was stated. It was just stating that firearms that are in common use of lawful citizens. Under that nuance, it would all be loose black powder guns, which the ATF specifically stays hands off. They're not even considered guns.
Until they're used in a crime. So Weer'd, I have some good news.
Oh, please.
And this came to me via my social media mammal on Facebook, who helps me run the OBS page, and he lives in Minnesota. So this was originally a 2023 case that then got appealed to the circuit in 24, and then it was appealed up to SCOTUS in 25, and SCOTUS said, no, we're not going to hear it. So what happened is that back in 23, there was a lawsuit because Minnesota had a law stating that legal adults younger than 21 couldn't get a permit to carry a handgun. And so after the Bruin decision, so yes, in 2023, that lawsuit was brought and a judge agreed with them that, yes, this was unconstitutional. And the state appealed, and they appealed it to the 8th Circuit, and the 8th Circuit upheld that decision, citing Bruin. But Governor Walz and Attorney General Keith Ellison, they just kept appealing. And it got up to SCOTUS earlier this week, and SCOTUS looked at it and just said, no, we aren't going to hear it. And so that means that the 8th Circuit ruling stands, and the Minnesota government can't do anything about it. And so now it means that legal adults under 21 can get a concealed carry permit, and people who have listened to this podcast for any amount of time know how strongly I feel about 18 to 20-year-olds being allowed to defend themselves. You know, they're adults. Let them do adult things, and that includes the right to carry and the right to self-defense. So, I mean, I started to say good for Minnesota, but I mean, not the Minnesota government, but to that judge, and then to the circuit court, and then to SCOTUS for shutting it down. So this is great news, because not only does it strike that law down in Minnesota, but because this ruling was made by the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals, that means, I mean, it doesn't have the strength of law to apply to all the other states, but it gives a very definite message to the other states in the 8th Circuit that this is how we feel. And so, I mean, I haven't looked at all the other states. Maybe they have a law like that, maybe they don't, but it's good in that it affects more than just Minnesota. So that's your good news.
It's also another shifting of the Overton window in the fact that saying that, you know, people will sometimes get up in arms of oh my goodness, people under the age of 21 carrying concealed handguns. And you're like, yeah, so what? There's nothing wrong with that. And guess what? There'll be nothing wrong with that. There'll still be young people shooting each other in the big cities there and all that, and they won't have permits. And there will be people that have permits that will be more law-abiding than law enforcement, as studies show.
Okay, here's what I was trying to find as I was talking, and I couldn't. That's why it sounded really stilted. The Supreme Court's action does not set a nationwide precedent, but the 8th U.S. Circuit's decision sets a standard in the 7 states where it has jurisdiction: Minnesota, Arkansas, Iowa, Missouri, Nebraska, North Dakota, and South Dakota.
And, of course, other states can, in their own appeals, can
cite it.
Can cite it, yep.
Yeah.
It may not directly apply to them, but it has... it is precedent.
And so that will potentially help encourage Florida lawmakers, because, as I said, the bill passed in the House, but it still hasn't progressed out of the Senate, and maybe that will spur them to passing that law.
Yeah.
So just good news all around as far as I'm concerned.
It certainly will let the more squishy, quote-unquote, pro-gun people know that maybe I'm not on the right side of history here.
On a related topic, ACP's legal correspondent Oddball gives us his analysis of why SCOTUS declined certiorari, God, that's a mouthful, in Antoniuk v. James.
Welcome to Oddball's Corner Pocket. If you listened to episode 341, you heard us talking about SCOTUS denying certiorari of Antioch versus James. At the time, I stated that I hadn't had a chance to really read into that particular case, and was quickly reading up on it as we were talking. I've had a chance to read into it, and Weer'd has asked me to talk about it. If you're unaware, Antioch versus James is a case that has been around since 2022, when it was known as Antioch versus Hochul. It is a lawsuit aimed against the state of New York over the law that New York passed in response to NYSERPA versus Bruin. This law is a veritable smorgasbord of anti-gun good ideas. These ideas include expanding the definition of prohibited person, and if you want a pistol permit, that'll be 16 hours in classroom, in-person interview, character references, handing over access to any social media accounts you've used for the past 3 years, being declared of good moral character by the state, and a partridge in a pear tree. Oh, and declaring huge chunks of New York City as a sensitive place and requiring the owner of an establishment to give you permission to carry on their property. Essentially the opposite of the standard requirement of establishments posting that they're gun-free zones if they wish to ban them. Incidentally, if you've heard someone refer to a vampire law, this is what they're talking about. In other words, New York received the NYSERPA versus Bruin decision and responded by infringing on the Second Amendment harder. As I've said, this case has been around for a while. It's actually already been to the Supreme Court once, where the Supreme Court remanded the case all the way back down to the district level, with the instructions of, no, seriously, read NYSERPA v. Bruin again and try again. The district court issued a preliminary injunction, which, of course, the Second Circuit appellate court at least partially overturned. They at least agreed that the social media access requirement was a blatant First Amendment violation. And then the plaintiffs appealed to the Supreme Court, and SCOTUS has decided not to hear the case at this point. So, I'm guessing a few of you are trying to build a flow chart to figure out exactly where the case now stands. The answer is basically where it stood when it was first filed back in 2022. Of course, with a couple exceptions, most of the reporting is skipping over that. One of the folks that actually covers it beyond, well, we lost, is William Kirk over at Washington Gun Law. I'll make sure that Weer'd adds a link to his YouTube video in the show notes. So, why did SCOTUS pass on this case? Well, unfortunately, it's pretty standard for them to simply state that they're not going to hear the case, and this is no exception. That said, I'm going to say that it's not actually that surprising that they passed on it. This case is in what is referred to as an interlocutory state. That is, lower courts are still involved in the case. Heck, the case is still slated to be argued in front of a district court, much less gone back through the appellate court process. SCOTUS really doesn't like dealing with cases that haven't already gone all the way through the process. They'd much rather see if the lower courts make the right decision before stepping in. I'm also guessing that there's a bit of don't jump the line and wait your turn as well. During the roundtable, I stated that I believe that the Second Amendment is still being treated like a second-class right. Unfortunately, I still believe this. It's hard to look at the number of cases currently in the courts where the court has come up with rather inventive ways of either twisting NYSERPA v. Bruin or ignoring it altogether to come to the conclusion that the state can continue to infringe on the Second Amendment when it finds it convenient. Or the fact that, as of the time of this recording, we still haven't heard from SCOTUS as to whether they'll hear cases dealing with magazine capacity limits or assault weapons bans. That said, I'm no longer all that mad at SCOTUS for giving this case a pass. They're following their normal behavior, and their decision can be explained without going into the case itself. What does tick me off is that the plaintiffs went ahead and tried to push things all the way to the top. It's fairly rare for SCOTUS to get involved in a case that's still at the district level, especially over a preliminary injunction. While it would be nice if SCOTUS would say, yeah, this is clearly unconstitutional, and save everyone the time and money, that just wasn't going to happen. Unfortunately, we know that in areas like New York, you might actually win on the district level, but the Circuit of Appeals will figure out some way of explaining how things like good moral character requirements isn't may issue BS that's there to make sure that the filthy masses don't get their hands on legal guns. After all, they might actually start thinking of themselves as real people. We can't have that. The only remedy I see is to get the case pushed all the way through and hopefully finally get SCOTUS to pick up the case at that point, which won't happen until after all the appeals and en banc and all that. The lawyer should have known this, and that this was just a waste of their client's time and money. And, well, unfortunately, the state has all the time and money that it needs, while plaintiffs don't. I hope you find this interesting, and maybe you learned something. If you'd like to read more of my thoughts, I have a blog at gunscarstech.com. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions for future segments, I can be reached at Oddball at gunscarstech.com or on the ACP Facebook page. Until next time, have a good one. Oh yeah, is it too early for me to start drinking yet? Oh, I guess I'm still on the clock at work. Dang it.
So Oddball mentioned that the social media aspect of this case was ruled unconstitutional and thrown out. And I'm proud to remind our listeners that Operation Blazing Sword teamed up with the Knight First Amendment Institute to file an amicus brief in that particular case back when it was called Antoniuk v. Negrelli. So it's actually gone through 3 attorneys general at least, because it was Hochul and then Negrelli and now James. And so, in case you need a refresher, the link to that is in the show notes.
Yeah, and I'm glad it isn't dead yet, but I've already said it a few times before. But the courts are just one of the branches of the government, and a faster solution than waiting for all this stuff to trickle down to the Supreme Court would be to get our representatives to pass some legislation that would protect us from these unconstitutional laws.
I mean, that would be great, but how likely is that to happen?
I mean, it's not entirely unlikely. It's one of those, it's merely
improbable.
Yeah. I mean, All right, now you're making me grumpy. I'm.
I mean, it's funny because you are like always the optimistic Pollyanna type, and so if I've made you pessimistic, whoo.
Well, it's simple. It's just the fact that they're not. I mean, I would be a lot more optimistic if there was a whole bunch of pro-gun bills just bouncing around and going into committee and all that. They're playing the game. They're moving the ball around in the field. But it's just one of those. It feels like they're just giving it a good leaving it alone, and I don't like that.
Well, I don't like it either.
So I am going to change the subject.
You do that.
And mention that after a recent expedition to the city for a class, Xander returns to discuss the philosophy that all politics are local.
Welcome to Independent Thoughts with yours truly, Xander Opal. On looking at what's been going on both recently and historically, the adage that all politics are local is really true on a deep level. It's not just working on electing people that are just beginning their journey to the various governorships and so on. It's also about how so many laws are one size fits some. None. The problems of cities like Detroit or even Muskegon are not the problems of small towns, nor are they the problems of massive sprawls such as Chicago, New York, and LA. Small towns flat out don't have gang problems, and everyone knows everyone else's business. Any attempt to apply the same rules, regulations, and attitudes on these places as the ones used in big cities at best builds a lot of resentment and at worst destroys lives. There's no need for zero tolerance when the local officer can just stop by next door and bring things up in a neighborly way before stuff gets out of hand. The more people you cram together in a space, the less neighborly things get. Worse, in the US at least, once an area has a generation of job loss and thus no income from legitimate jobs, that area becomes a shell that slowly rots, falling into a state of despair, where nobody who is not from that area dares set foot. It isn't the guns that make these spaces dangerous, it's a lack of hope compounded by a lack of economical ways to lift the area back up into a thriving community. These hard times should not punish everyone else. In fact, it drives people willing to spend more further away if they cannot legally carry tools of self-defense. Most people don't want to get into a fight or risk being attacked, after all. Banning tools such as knives and firearms covers up the deeper problems which deserve a bespoke solution to the area, communities, and individuals. But then, I guess everyone looks the same from up on the ivory towers and government plinths. These self-appointed lords see all else as peasants to be ruled over, not as unique people with unique lives. Just as the Second Amendment shouldn't be political, neither should treating each person as an individual human being worth the basic courtesy of humanity. Have fun, be safe. I hope I gave you something to think about.
I'm going to say, as somebody who supports many of the policies and ideals of the Libertarian Party, I'm always upset the fact that the first time we see any Libertarian on a ticket is on a presidential card. And it just doesn't work that way. You can't go top down. When I was a kid, it was my late teens to my early 20s. Angus King was the governor of Maine. And his governorship, I thought, was an absolute disaster. And it was not because any of his policies were bad or because he signed any bad laws. It was because he was an independent. And it seemed like the Republicans were against him because he caucuses with the Democrats. He is a fairly left-wing guy in his politics. But yet, on the other hand, the Democrats really weren't that willing to play ball because they kind of see him as a quisling because he wasn't putting a D after his name. And so we've got to have dog catchers and town councilors and city councilors and state representatives as libertarians or greens or whatever your favorite third party will be. before you start throwing the president out there, because they need to have people behind them once they get into office.
Well, there's also the fact that they need a track record of success, because it seems like other than Ron Paul, everyone who has tried to run for office as a libertarian has failed. And so they need to shake that baggage of the failure party and start racking up some wins.
Yeah, no, that's
and
also true.
I agree with you. Do it locally. Build momentum. And I think if we ever get a successful libertarian president, that they will first have been a libertarian governor. And there's actually a chance of that happening because New Hampshire is pretty libertarian. So, I mean, I don't pretend to be clued into politics, but I would think it would be worth it for the Libertarian Party to pour a lot of time and money and effort into New Hampshire and try and make that the libertarian state, and, you know, have libertarian representatives and then a governor, and then build from that. But there may be something that I'm ignorant of.
Oh, not really. It's more of a few years ago. I mean, really, it's like now like 20 years ago. There was a thing called the Free State Project, where essentially,
Yes, I remember.
Yeah, libertarians figured out what state would be, you know, the ripest for the pickings of for libertarians, and they chose New Hampshire in the fact that it's essentially a swing state. It's also a rural state, so there's low taxes, and it's a lot of just individual liberty already there. It's the most gun-friendly state in the union, but also we got a ton of House seats in the state. I'm not really sure exactly how they divide up the districts, but the districts in New Hampshire are absolutely tiny, and so there's a lot of people. There's a lot of little small races to run, and so like I know several people who have been state representatives in the state of New Hampshire, and so that was the whole idea. But honestly speaking, it really kind of slowly started petering out. They definitely had some very great protests and interesting stuff going on. My absolute favorite was, I'm not sure if it's statewide or if it's just in the town of Keene, but essentially they got rid of the ordinance where a woman topless was considered an obscenity. And the greatest protest out there was they had a young lady who was very petite with her top off, and she looked lovely. And she was wearing it had a sign that says it's illegal for me to do this, flanked by two very large burly men who
were also topless.
And they were considerably better endowed than she was. And we're noting that their much larger breasts were perfectly legal.
It's because of the nipple. The nipple is the root of all sin. If you can see the nipple, it's sinful.
I guess so. I mean, guys have nipples.
Yes, but I don't know. They're not nursing nipples or whatever. Look, I agree that it doesn't make sense, but that's why pasties make topless dancing legal.
Mm-hmm. Makes all the difference.
So yeah, you were talking about the Free State Project, and that reminded me of something, and it's I can't really summarize it, but there's an article here from the New Republic where they talk about, as a result of this, there was a town in New Hampshire that was basically invaded by bears because the libertarian nature of the town remained undecided on how to deal with these bears that were eating garbage, and eventually it got really bad, and I think it resulted in the dissolution of the township. I'm going to post the link. It's not really super relevant to the conversation other than libertarians being their own worst enemy, and it's an interesting and fun read.
Yeah, I will say that I actually had a coworker who lived in the Keene area and came in as a Free State Project guy. He was saying that, some parts of it were really, really nice, but also there was the bad parts of libertarianism was there. It was just one of those you'll be sleeping at 2:00 in the morning with your windows open on a fine spring or summer night, and someone will just open up with their machine gun, or someone will have a massive party with barn fires, and it's one of those it's legal. Of course, the libertarian philosophy of, you could do whatever you want so long as it doesn't hurt other people. But some people don't take that into as good a consideration as others. But either way, it has also led me to an interesting, Xander mentioned big city politics versus more rural politics. And I don't know, this is really more of just a thought experiment, what if more rural individualized politics were in a big city? Obviously, the nature of big cities, where there isn't really that much privacy and there's a lot of dependent on public services, does lead to people that are much less individual liberty minded. But I don't know. I don't see why we can't have. I certainly know a lot of independent, liberty minded people that live in big cities. I think it might work. We should try it. He says in the most ineffectual way possible, because I'm not going to convince the establishment to change.
What's the worst that could happen?
Bears taking over your city. I will have to say, Aaron, when you said a town, you're mentioning libertarians in a town taken over by bears, I was a bit wondering what you were talking about.
You thought I was talking about the other definition of bears.
That's right. The burly, hairy men that might be seeking other men.
So weird. You know who else are burly, hairy men?
I mean, there's more than it's not all of them, because we know many of our listeners, and we could definitely point to more than a few that are not bears. But there's probably a few bears in our listenership, and bears and non-bears and otters and twinks. It's a silly one. This is a very silly one, but we appreciate all of you listening to our fine podcast. Thank you so much. We need listeners to go through, but we got to give a very special thanks to our supporters on Patreon. To bring on Patreon, go to patreon.com/Assorted Calibers podcast to sign up. Patrons get an early release of the podcast, plus bonus content like our hilarious blooper reels, the ACB film track, and the ACB Mag Dump.
Also, please remember to rate us on Apple Podcasts and Pocket Casts, subscribe to us on the platform of your choice, and share the show with your friends, both online and off.
I have a blog. It's called weerdworld.com. That's WEERD world.com. And hear me weekly on Handgun Radio on the Firearms Radio Network.
And you can get more from me at Linktree/Aaron Paulette. That's linktree.ee/Aaron Paulette, all one word.
And thanks to Nate Spencer for our music.
So, Weer'd Beard eats artichokes without any seasoning whatsoever. I don't know how he does it. Meanwhile, I insist that my deviled eggs be redeemed and be called Angel. Our culinary quirks are assorted, and so's our podcast. Good night, everyone.
Good night.